Everybody's picking at their vegetable curry and like their winter jackets and bundled up. And this guy's just throwing back beers, wearing shorts and a t-shirt. He just like slammed a bottle of liquor and was eating yak feet.
All right, so today is episode 73. Got a couple special guests on the day, a couple buddies of mine who recently traveled to Everest Base Camp, which is wild because that's on the other side of the world. And Base Camp is not just like something classic you pull up to. You got to trek to get there. You got to fly out. You got to go on a couple-day hiking trip to make it to the base camp.
Which is almost 18,000 feet up.
Yeah, I mean, it's a whole journey to get out there. So it's got to be super cool just being at the base of the tallest mountain in the world around people that are about to go summit that. So excited to hear about their experience there. I think that'll be really cool.
Yeah, and so we are recording this episode the week before. Right now, as you're listening to it, Alan and I are in Madeira, Portugal, just chilling, having a grand time. It's going to be awesome. And so we're going to be getting travel content there. And then next week, I guess we'll be in... I don't know where we'll be at this point next week, but we will record next week, talk about the Madeira trip, talk about what we have going on, and then the week after. Since we're pre-recording this, we thought this would be a perfect episode to have a guest on. We've been kind of teasing that we wanted to do it, but starting having more guests on, hearing people's personal stories, adventures that they've gone on. But because this episode is pre-recorded, we don't have a 2-minute drill because we don't know what's going on in the world of sports next week. No Iceman. We will have a draft later. With these guys, but just kind of wanted to give a little context of that, of what we have going on.
Yeah, so these are my buddies, Parker Novak and Will Sutton. I met them down in Gainesville. They're PAs as well, met them through a mutual friend. We'll hear about how we met later. They work at the burn ICU unit in, I believe, at University of Florida. And so, it should be interesting to hear about what they have to say about the trip and excited for that interview. So let's hop right in.
Y'all all met Alan in Gainesville, right?
Yeah, we met in Gainesville, actually on a kayaking trip in Gainesville. So that was a fun weekend. We did, it's like 27, 28 miles down the Santa Fe River. And there's a bunch of springs off the Santa Fe that you can like free dive in, swim in, snorkel in, all that stuff. It's a great trip overall. So that's how we actually met.
I kind of make it down to the springs at some point.
Yeah, you do, man. The springs are awesome. You've never been to any of them, right? And then Will's a master freediver over here.
I don't think so.
Okay, then I've heard you talk about Will then. I didn't know that was Will.
Yeah.
Because Alan was trying to get into freediving. Was that when you burst your, like, the blood vessel behind your eye or whatever?
Yeah, I forgot it. I forgot about that. I wasn't equalizing right. And
was that the same trip?
Yep. Same trip.
Yep.
I was like, I want to go down far like the cool kids and didn't know how to equalize.
Trying to hang with Will.
Blasted a blood vessel in my eye. So the next week at work, it looked like I got in a fight and everybody was asking about it. It was great.
It's funny. I didn't realize it started, like it kept looking bad. I remember when it happened, they're like, oh man, but it was looking gnarly even the next week.
Oh yeah. Man. Yeah, it lasted for
it might have been
like
worse the next week.
Yeah, it was bad.
It was a little alarming to look at, but we didn't really say that much, but yeah. It looked pretty bad.
Well, we're all PAs. We knew it wasn't a big deal.
Yeah.
It was like, it's fine.
Medical professionals.
Yeah.
Kept going for it, too, which was probably not the smart move to do.
It definitely made it better.
Yeah, for sure.
To hear about your trip and everything.
I guess we could start by talking about, like, how it came together, I guess, because it was kind of on I don't know, it was kind of an accident, I guess. Not like an accident, but we both work in the same like ICU, so it's like always a challenge to get some of the time off when we're trying to go on a trip. So we were just kind of like approached like the team and we're like, hey, like it would be really cool if we could do this thing. You know, Parker is getting married at the end of the year, and you know, I'm maybe thinking about moving, so I feel like our time to do like a really big extended hiking trip is like limited. But like, how would you feel about just giving us 2 weeks off in March? And like to our surprise, they were like, sure, like we could do it in April. And I was just like, all right, well, let's do it. So it started coming together once we like realized we could actually get the time off, which is kind of a tough sell a little bit. And I think for like a lot of people, like, I mean, you almost need a month to do something like that and to like really stay out there for the right amount of time and enjoy it.
Are y'all at the same clinic?
We work in the hospital, but we work on the same like medicine team. So, and there's like 9 or 10 providers. Maybe that's over counting, but,
Yeah, that's right.
but like our coverage for the month while we were gone was thin.
Is it trickier, like the fact that both of y'all were trying to do it? It's not like
Yeah,
like they're losing 2 people for that whole trip.
yeah, for sure.
Thankfully, the person that does the scheduling had just taken a 2-week vacation right before we went. So I think that gave us a little bit of room, So it wasn't unprecedented, but it was very accommodating.
Nice. So total trip time was how long? Like how many days you have off work?
April
Like 19.
to like May.
And that's counting travel on both sides.
Mm-hmm.
The hike itself was the route that we did. It's almost like easier to look at a map, but Basecamp itself is just like this. You basically grind uphill into the mountains, and I think we wanted to not walk all the way up and then retrace our steps coming back, so we ended up doing a circuit, and that takes a little bit longer. So the hike that we signed up for and we booked a guide for was, I think, initially supposed to be like 14 or 15 days. Yeah. With travel on both sides. And it takes 2 days to get out there. And then you want like an extra cushion day just in case something happens. So it's a big time commitment, aside from like just paying to get out there. It's a lot to sell to, your girlfriend or your fiance, family, wherever you work.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, everyone was super excited for us, and honestly, like, I don't know, we got like a hero's welcome from some people when we got back. Especially some of our like older attendings that we worked with were like really, really excited that they were able to even just text message us on the other side of the world.
Yeah, man, that's a huge
awesome.
thing. It's like Everest. It's the pinnacle of mountain climbing, right? Like it's there, and now we know people that have been to it at least, which is crazy.
Well, been to the base camp. A lot of people
Right.
kind of go like, "Oh, at Everest."
Right,
And we're
right.
like, well, hyperbole. We like got near it. We could see it.
Yeah,
but,
but you were technically on Everest, right? Like the base camp is on the mountain.
I mean,
is it
yeah,
technically?
I guess it is.
I feel like it's gotta be.
It's 18, right, for base camp elevation?
Base
Just
camp's
about.
a little below 18. I think it's like 17.5 to 17.7, which is still quite high. And you feel it.
Yeah.
And then the highest point that we reached, there's kind of this like rocky summit. It's basically like just a large hill, and it almost doesn't even look like a true summit because of everything around it. But it's this rocky outcropping that goes up to 18.5 that we made it up to, and it looks over base camp, and you get a better view of Everest from there. And that was our high point.
What was that view like?
That base camp is kind of in this valley, and it's surrounded by like Nuptse, Lhotse, and you can't really actually see Everest. You can see the tip of it from base camp because it's obscured by all these giant 8,000 meter peaks. And so you hike up this really big hill that's like really cold. It was so cold, but it is really pretty once you get up there. But you kind of get better views of like Lhotse and Nuptse, and then you can kind of see Everest like kind of peeking out over the other ones. So it's like a breathtaking view. But it is kind of hard to see Everest. It's like kind of always hiding behind the other mountains around it.
The other gigantic mountains. So the little hill
Yeah.
you hiked up, harder or easier than Sugarloaf Mountain? What do you think?
Oh man, pretty comparable.
Okay,
I'd
cool.
say.
Yeah, on par,
Tuck
right?
down the Sugarloaf.
Yeah,
The elevation at that height, how is that? Like, did you notice a huge difference right away, or did you kind of have a couple days to acclimatize to it? Or
you definitely notice it. I mean, they acclimatize you pretty well. I mean, you fly into Kathmandu, and that's at like 4,000 feet, and then you fly to Lukla, and that's like 9,000. And I think like kind of every day you gain like 1,000 or 2,000 feet. So it's this really like intentional acclimatization kind of thing. And so it took us like a week to get to base camp. Will, maybe. So we gained like what, 8,000 feet over 7 days or something. So you definitely feel it, especially when you get to the top. You're kind of feeling kind of crappy the whole time. Mm-hmm. Like you're kind of like a little flu-like kind of, like headache. You're short of breath. It's not terrible, but you definitely feel it. I think the whole time.
Yeah. Were y'all with a group too, like some other people that were with y'all, or was it just y'all and a guide? Or
the company we booked through was honestly the guide we ended up with was great. We went with Cigar.
Yeah,
he's our age too, so it was like honestly like hiking with another one of the guys a lot of the time, which was really cool. But then nice. we went. There was a group of 4 of us total with the guide, and Kevin, who was Parker, one of Parker's like childhood friends, who lives out in San Francisco, met us out there and did the hike with us.
That's cool. I guess let's pop back to the travel to get there. How was that? Like coming from, I guess y'all leave from Orlando, or how did you end up at Kathmandu? Was the first place you flew into?
Yeah.
We flew out of Miami, and I had worked the day before, and Will had just worked a night shift. And so Will was like delirious, and we drove down to Miami. Flew out of there, Miami to Doha, Qatar. And so that was like, what, 14 hours? Will?
14 or 15.
Probably.
Yeah. Just on a plane.
Yeah. And then,
did you get out in Qatar at all, or was it like a quick layover?
We actually initially missed our connecting flight, but the Qatar Airlines was pretty accommodating and put us on another one. So, but like we weren't in the airport for very long. I guess we ended up on the way there. We slept in the airport we booked like a sleeping pod for like 4 hours and then like made our connection.
This is kind of embarrassing. We actually tried to leave the airport because Qatar comped us like a free hotel, and like we had like hours before the next day, and we were like, okay, like it'll be worth it if we hustle out there and we get a cab or whatever. And we tried for like 45 minutes to leave the airport, and it's like one of the coolest airports in the world, I guess. It's basically just a giant mall, and so we were walking, and there's like a monorail in the airport, and we just like couldn't find a way to get out. It's like
there's no exit. It's a bubble. It's not even
stuck in the Qatar airport.
We couldn't find the exit.
We could see the exit. We kept going. Literally, and then we got 4 hours until we got to be on this flight. I don't know how. We're gonna sleep here.
It's tough. We were pretty like delirious from the flight. Like neither of us really slept. Also, and we were like trying to wander around. Like that you could go to one of the kiosks and they'd kind of point you in the right direction. Like, oh, the exit's over that way, and you'd walk for like a half a mile. And then there'd be another kiosk with like a 20-minute line. And you're like, I don't want to stop and ask for directions again. We just have to figure it out.
I'm sure it's on a different language too. So it's probably not super easy to find.
Yeah.
So from Qatar, where was the next spot you flew to?
Then we flew into Kathmandu, which was like a 4.5-hour flight. And that was easy by comparison. And then our, we got picked up by our guide at the airport. The Kathmandu airport's pretty chaotic, but Kathmandu was cool. The driving into the city was a little stressful, and I'm glad we had like a driver and didn't like call an Uber, because we had heard stories from people calling an Uber and someone pulls up on a motorbike and is like, all right, hop on the back with your luggage.
Both of you and your luggage.
You see these people like zipping through town between cars. And the driving situation is a little bit sketchy. Like the rules of the road are up for interpretation, I think, a little bit. But
right.
I mean, it's a city of 4 million people and there's no traffic lights. So there'll be 3 people kind of naturally, organically just driving past each other, and it's crazy.
Yeah.
Do people stop at intersections, or do they just kind of swerve to the side and go around people?
The traffic is slower, right?
Yeah.
So people are going 20 or 30 miles an hour on an American highway. So everyone's kind of just moving slowly at the same time. I think that's kind of how it works.
Alan and I are about to go to Senegal in a little bit, and there's this, I guess, intersection, traffic circle, whatever you want to call it, near my brother's house there. And it's got, I think it's like 8 or 9 roads off of it. And some people go like clockwise, some people go counterclockwise, some people just like cut through the middle, but somehow it just works. It's just like, don't hit someone or don't hit them that hard if you do.
Hope you're gonna be driving, Joe.
This
I'm not
works.
trying to drive in that.
Yeah,
I think
it's fun.
You definitely have to have like a pulse for how the traffic runs there before you can, like, you can't fly in and just be like, all right, I'm driving today. Like, you gotta like feel it out a little bit.
Yeah.
Our guide actually drove a motorcycle, and we were like, "Oh, like that's kind of crazy. Have you ever been in an accident?" And he was like, "Oh, I've been in like 3. I mean, it wasn't a big deal. You know, like I got hit, but I was okay." And we were like, "Oh, shoot."
So did he pick you up on a motorcycle, or was it a?
No, we were in
car?
a cab, but this was our
Okay.
hiking guide
Gotcha.
was telling us, like, outside of this, he owns a motorbike, and yeah, he told us he had been in like 3 accidents pretty casually, like that was a normal number. He's only 29.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Yeah, I guess that's the difference of going like 25, 30 miles an hour versus 70, 80,
Yeah.
90.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. So from there, got picked up at the airport. Where'd you head to then?
We immediately slept for like 7 or 8 hours. Then we like
They just traveled all the way across the world.
Yeah, then we met with the guide. They kind of gave us like the trip rundown, which I think we were like mostly already like familiar with. And then like the next day we went back to the Kathmandu airport to get our flight to Lukla, which is our first experience with trying to travel in or out of Lukla, which is great. Parker has really strong feelings about Lukla and their airport, which I can let him talk about the return flight. But we basically immediately got to the airport. Our flight was canceled. And we were approached by like people trying to sell us helicopters because, you know, I guess if the weather is too bad for flights to go into or out of this Lukla airport, which if you look at pictures of it, it's small. It's kind of a unique airport in the fact that the runway is very short. You know, it's known for having a ton of cancellations, but they'll offer you helicopters to fly in because they're more maneuverable through the mountains and they can still fly even when the weather's not as good. You know, so we immediately are trying to figure out like a helicopter situation so that we can start our hike on time. And, you know, it's the guys that are like, oh, we just canceled the flights are the ones that are like trying to sell us helicopters. So it's like kind of a sketchy situation because you feel like you're like being taken advantage of a little bit.
Which you probably are.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's, you know, that because the prices of the helicopters are subject to change on the spot. Very, very much.
How much were they running?
The way up and the way down, because on the way down, you don't really have an option to just pass on the flight. So
Yeah.
they're more than happy to carry you up there. And then I think once they're up there, you're in a more difficult situation.
Oh, no. I know where this is going.
But
Parachute.
it was like 300 a head probably. So like 1,500 for a helicopter, which is like, I mean, it's a 45-minute flight. It's dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, on the way back, we were hearing, I think we paid 400, but we were hearing 700-ish, 800-ish, just like in passing. Again, because you're just walking through like the offices and people are haggling and they're like, oh, okay, 700, okay, that sounds good. You know, it's like this very
like a bidding war for seats that's happening in front of you.
Yeah. I feel like it's kind of sketchy to get the cheapest helicopter possible. Like you probably want to get like at least a mid-level helicopter because you don't know what you're getting with the dirt cheap one. So.
We got the 100 helicopter.
Right. Oh, you don't want to get the $100.
What's the difference from 200 to 300?
Yeah. But y'all ended up catching a plane there, I guess, out of that airport. Or did you end up on a helicopter?
We ended up on a helicopter, and it was our first trip for any of us on a helicopter, which was fun because we ended up, you know, we were like, oh, we took a helicopter because the weather was too bad for planes to go out.
Yeah, geez. How was that ride?
Kind of scary.
It was the takeoff was cool, but like it was so, and the landing was cool. No, it was just so smoggy. In Kathmandu, it's really hazy, and then unfortunately, basically all the way up to Lukla, you can't hardly see. You're basically flying in a cloud, and so it was a little scary. We flew with this Australian guy who was summiting, I think, Island Peak.
He was doing. Maybe it was.
He was doing Peak, and then afterwards he was like, I've never been in a helicopter before, but now I know that I'm not a fan of flying helicopters.
Right.
And so a little bit of like, it was kind of, And you could hear like because you had the headphones on, headsets, so you could hear all the radio chatter, and it was kind of like just kind of a little hectic, a little unorganized. But our pilot just had like this really badass vibe to him. He was this like New Zealand guy. He just inspired confidence. I don't know. It's the way he just wore his sunglasses, and so I was like that helped.
Yeah,
that
like
helped.
one of those guys from the movie where they're like, just get in with me, we'll make it kind of deal.
Yeah.
I mean,
Are you ripping like straight through the Himalayas on this flight, like, but you just can't see them because of the fog or the smog or whatever? Or is it more kind of open in that spot? Do you know?
You're not quite there yet. I mean, we couldn't really see much because of, like the smog and like the clouds on the way up, but you're not like quite to it yet. You're not at a point where you can see a whole lot.
Gotcha.
I think you don't really get like great views of the Himalayas, I'd say, until you get to like past Namche. I don't know if you think the same park. I think that was probably when we started to get really good views, like in the path.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
You have to reach a certain. You have to get
agreed.
over the hump of a certain point to see, like, start seeing like the mountains there.
And we were trying to kind of read all the gauges on the helicopter. I consider myself something of an amateur flight guy.
Yeah.
Really understanding it, but there was a meter that looked like it was measuring altitude. And so, you kind of fly out and you're hanging like 9 to work your way up to like 11,000 feet ish. And so it kind of feels like sometimes you're going over big ridges, but again, you can't really see well enough to even know what you're flying over.
Right.
So
you get there from the helicopter. What's next on the trip?
I mean, from there we started our hike in. The hiking was excellent. The hiking I thought was like, I don't know, some of my favorite that we've done. Like the trek was really cool. Like we went through like we take a pretty traditional route to get up to the base camp. We spent our first night in Padang, which is like a small Pakding. I'm gonna butcher the names of all of the villages. Just preface.
It's okay. We're undrafted amateurs on here.
Okay, great,
it's all good.
Great. So we spent a night there. That was like a 3-hour hike the first day, but it was mostly flat. Then the next day we went up to Namche Bazaar, which is like really the first like city and that people stay in. And from there, I think that's where most of the people live in the valley. And during the season, they'll hike. They themselves will hike up to all of the hotels and huts that are further up on the circuit and like staff them and like bring up the blankets on yaks and stuff to like basically provide the service to trekkers and people that are doing the peaks in the area. So Namche is like a pretty well established city. And then forget the name, the city that's like just 20 minutes away. Those are 2 large hubs. And then every village from there on up is much smaller that you stay in. But Namche was quite cool and we got good views. Like that was our first view of Mount Everest. Was we did an acclimatization hike the next day up out of Namche, like 1,000 feet up, got your first views of like Amadablam, which I think is probably the most picturesque mountain in the range.
Agreed.
And then Lhotse and Everest we could see also, which was really cool. That's right.
So all these other mountains are just huge, right? And does it not overshadow Everest, but it's not like you just walk up and you're like, oh wow, that one's Everest, or is it?
You definitely know which one is Mount Everest just because it has this I mean, it's like legendary, like all these stories about it, and it's the tallest.
Yeah.
So it is like a point of, that's that one. But I do think that the thing that was like coolest to me was maybe some of the other mountains that we saw there, like are much more picturesque. Like Mount Everest is really cool to see, but I don't think it's like the most picturesque mountain. Like it's not, people aren't taking pictures of it like they are like in the Grand Tetons, or like it's not like this iconic looking peak. Whereas I think some of the other mountains that we're going to mention like are really picturesque and are these like really visually cool destinations. And I don't know, they look like when you imagine like a mountain in like a storybook, like that's really what they look like. It's like really like steep here peaks. So
I totally agree. I think Amadablam, the cool thing about Amadablam is kind of the whole trip. You kind of see her like every day or two, and you're kind of walking around Amadablam. And so when you first see it, it's kind of has this like Matterhorn look to it, like kind of from the side. And then like, a couple days later, you're at a different viewpoint and it just looks totally different. But it's just like one of the prettiest mountains you've ever seen. And so it's kind of ever present, and you're also seeing different angles of it the whole time, which is really cool. And then even though it doesn't get much, like Everest is like a full mile taller, it's still like 22,000 feet or something. So it's still like a mighty mountain by any standard, really.
Yeah, that's cool. That's something I forget when people talk about Everest is that all the other mountains around it are also just gigantic. Like the Himalayas are just so high up, and I bet that was awesome just hiking and seeing all the different ones.
Yeah,
Sweet.
To be honest, even the day that we were doing Kalapatar, the mountain that Kalapatar kind of leads up to, which was our high point where we went up to get the viewpoint of Everest. Like, I think it's Pumori is the one that's behind it, and like that's a really picturesque peak, and you're almost like, I don't know, you get a little bit spoiled. You're like, I don't know what to look at. Like, there's all these amazing, like 6,000 plus meter peaks everywhere, and it does create a really cool scene, like being able to just like walk through like this, I don't know, this panorama basically the whole time for days.
Sounds awesome. So it took you how many days to like get to base camp on the hike?
7 days?
It was
6 days?
I think it was 6.
Well, something like that.
It was.
What kind of mileage were y'all putting up on those days?
So the total that we did, like if you look it up on All Trails, which is like subject to being wrong, I think it's 84 miles is the trek that we did, and we ended up doing it in 12 days. We did it in an abbreviated amount of time. We skipped an acclimatization day, and then we cut out a day on the return because one, I think we were like feeling good enough to do that, and also we were sort of hearing like, oh, you should arrive to Lukla early to like maybe wait for a flight for a few days to get out, or get a helicopter. so we had that in the back of our minds too. But I think like that some of the days, like the days were very different. Like there were some days were only a few miles, like if it was a big elevation day, but some of them were quite long, where we were doing like 13 miles in a day, which feels like a lot. Like normally, I think under normal circumstances, you can knock it out, no problem. But the later part of the trek was all above 15,000 feet, like sustained, and you're kind of like going up and down some of the days. So it feels like you're breathing heavy. The miles feel pretty long for some of those.
And y'all skipped an acclimatization day, coming from basically true zero in Florida. So that's kind of wild because you're coming from just sea level. So that's impressive.
I was pretty proud of the style we did it in. Like we carried all of our stuff the whole way. We didn't use a porter. Parker didn't have to ride a horse for any of the trail. And I mean, there were people that would hike up to base camp and then get a helicopter down too, which our guide was kind of scoffed at. It's like, oh yeah, like if you're gonna do the trek, like do the whole trek. Like it's about the whole experience, not just like getting there and then having to take it back.
Yeah, like bailing out when you get there.
I think a little bit is how he was reading it.
Yeah,
but
for sure,
there were some people that were like really
fair.
like looked sick while we were up there, so I could see why they would abbreviate it.
Yeah, what was base camp like? Were the people that had hiked Everest there that y'all got to meet, or was it just people going to base camp?
There are people there. I think we mostly met people that were just doing the EBC hike. There's like a lot of tents and stuff set up, but they kind of have it like roped off. So, and a lot of people are out training and practicing glacier travel skills on the Kathmandu Glacier and stuff like that. So at least we didn't talk to a whole lot of people. We met some people kind of on the way that were doing Everest, or we met a guy who's going to do K2, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
But
I was going to say, I mean, we ran into some anyone who's like out there doing that, like at the very baseline, like you're probably a decent trekker, but like some of the people we ran into were like had quite the resume. They were like, oh yeah, I've done like, yeah, like Parker mentioned, we met like a guy who's a professional mountaineer just casually, like while we were like having a beer and having dinner. He was like, oh yeah, I've done, 11 of the 15, like 8,000 meter peaks. It's like my life goal to do all of them. And we're just like, oh, that's cool. Like he was Peruvian, and we were like, oh yeah, we've been hiking in Peru. And he was like, that's cool. Like
Nice.
I'm here to, do this mountain that I can't get a permit for. It's ridiculous. We were like, yeah, it's like, I can imagine.
Jeez.
I mean, yeah, there a lot of people we ran into where they're doing like summits, and you could tell like they're in like really great shape. Kind of interesting, like the high mountaineering like body type. It's not like your traditional, I don't know, like if you were to look at that guy, you wouldn't think that he was like a world-class mountaineer, but we were looking at videos of him online after we talked to him, and you're like, holy shit, this guy's like incredibly fit. These like videos of him like jumping across crevasses with ice axes and like hitting a wall and then just like
crazy.
climbing up it. You're like, oh damn.
What is the body type? Like
Yeah.
I'm just imagining a
curious.
short, skinny / kind of jacked
I
guy.
don't know.
This guy in particular, like 30 something, and he was like 5'8", had like a pretty good like beer belly to him.
Oh,
I
yeah.
think
Just not a
you
guy-
got to have some extra weight to
Yeah,
like,
you got to be able to
survive.
load up on carbs.
I was
before.
wondering if that's what you were
Yeah.
thinking. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's part of it. One of the most interesting people we saw at one of the huts was just like this. Maybe he looked like an old English guy. Like we were told like explicitly not to eat the meat the entire time we were out there. And we just saw this like guy who was wearing shorts and a t-shirt in one of the huts. Everybody else is in like their like winter jackets and bundled up, because like the huts you stay in, it's basically like this large community room with like a space heater in the middle. And everybody's, like picking at their like vegetable curry. And this guy's just throwing back beers. He just like slammed a bottle of liquor and was like eating like yak meat. But he had like this beer belly. And the whole time we were just thinking like, that guy's a badass. Like that guy's here doing some
prime physique right
some
there.
huge peak. That guy doesn't care.
That is the guy. Yeah.
That guy's the main character.
Yeah. That is peak, like human specimen
Yeah.
right there.
Which
What we
was
all aim
really
for.
funny.
What was the temperature? Like, because you're saying, like, I'm assuming it's pretty chilly,
Yeah.
right?
I mean,
Don't
it
know.
varied. Think Park. We couldn't
mean,
really check.
I think
Yeah.
the
It felt cold.
the weather report was like very unreliable. Like we would check and it was like off by 20 degrees at least. But I mean, I think the coldest we saw when we got up high in the morning, it was like in the teens Fahrenheit, I think.
Oh, so nothing great.
It warmed up quite quick. Once like the sun came out, it was always jackets were off within 15 minutes of hiking.
Yeah, I mean, it might have been single digits that day, like at night, but it's hard to say.
Yeah.
Because like, I mean, it varies so much with the elevation too.
But during the day, it felt fine. It's cold, but once you get hiking, you take your jacket off
Right, not bad.
within 20
I
minutes.
think most of the time during the day, it was probably like the 40s or 50s. Yeah, but you're like moving, so
Yeah.
it didn't feel too bad.
So at base camp, y'all, how long did y'all stay there? Just one night or a couple nights, or?
We didn't stay specifically like at base camp. We stayed at
Okay.
Workshop, which is a town just outside of base camp. And so, but you hike up like an hour to get there. And then we spent probably like, I don't know, 3 or 4 hours. Our friend Kevin hiked up into base camp and like hiked up to the glacier where people were heading out. But we just stayed there. And I mean, it's really huge. It's probably like, what do you think base camp is, like a mile long? So
Oh, geez.
like we stopped at a certain point and we're kind of just like watching people like out on the glacier. But our friend walked most of it with our guide and checked it out, which is fun. Like our guide was awesome. He was like treating it like it was a vacation. Some of the guides were like, oh, we can't go any further, which I think was like maybe BS. But our guy was like, yeah, just go for it. I want to go see it too. Like,
Yeah, let's
I
check
love
it out.
yeah. He's like,
Heck
I've
yeah.
never been up there. Like, let's go look. but we spent the day there, and then returned, and I think we were at Workshop for a night, like a day and a half, basically. Because we did a couple day hikes out of there, one to Basecamp, one up to Kalapatar, and then we headed back in the other direction. Gorshup's kind of cool. There's like a makeshift helipad there that's like a bunch of rocks, basically, and there's like helicopters coming and going constantly, bringing stuff up, bringing people up and down.
The people that live in those towns, are they like, is it just villages that have been there for like long time, or is it like stuff that's all related to Everest / mountaineering, hiking, that kind of thing?
I don't know how long they've been there. I think they're definitely driven, like the growth is driven by the tourism.
Yeah.
And kind of like Will said, I think a lot of the people like in the off season will move down to Namche, which is like a bigger town. So they kind of come up seasonally. I think people haven't inhabited, like you hear people talk about the Sherpa people.
Yeah.
Like I think they're a fairly recent, like 500 years ago. I think they immigrated from like over into the Tibet area.
Gotcha.
So it's pretty sparsely populated because there's not much to do. I mean, I think agriculture is really tough. Like I think we saw like they were doing some potatoes, and I think yaks basically give them like milk and fur and all that. But yeah, I think it's mostly driven by like tourism, those towns.
Yeah. The people that you saw, you said you saw people on the glacier, like outside of base camp. Were those people hiking or like mountaineering up Everest, or is that like, is that even happening like this time of year?
So I think it is. This is like, I mean,
Yeah.
April, May
The
is when
beginning
people
of it,
go
yeah.
for it.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I think it seemed like those people were out there practicing like their like mountaineering skills, because that's like, you know, like some people, I don't know, like show up and maybe need to learn some of the things they have to do before, or just practice like traveling across.
It's wild. Let me show up to Everest and not know.
I'm gonna get
this.
Yeah, I'm gonna go to Everest and learn how to climb a mountain.
I think there is some of that though.
Mm-hmm.
I respect it.
Yeah.
That's probably
and
what I would
like.
do.
That's not to understate. Like
course.
it's still like incredibly hard. I think I have a much better appreciation for like how hard it would be to summit that after just walking to base camp. So it's like still a massive accomplishment, but yeah, I mean, we also met someone who was just like, he flew in with us on the helicopter, and his goal was just to go up to Camp 3 of Everest, which is like still, you know, quite a challenge to get up there, and requires like a lot of.
Do you need a permit for that?
Oh yeah,
I'd assume so.
I would think.
I think so. I think there's certain permits depending on. Our guide was telling us a little bit about it. Depending on how high you go, you need like a certified guide, depending on the elevation. And there's certain like benchmarks where like you have to be certified as a guide to go past a certain point.
Okay.
And then I think there's also permits attached to that too. I know for Everest for sure to summit, there's like only a certain amount of permits per year.
Yeah.
But I don't know about the different stages of base camp or the camps on the way.
Yeah, like presumably the lower ones might be slightly easier to get the permits for, more
Yeah,
permits
I would
issued.
think, but I guess I don't know.
So after being out there, seeing Everest, making the trek up to base camp, being around it, do you have any aspirations to do Everest? Go back and try to make it up?
I think Will and I talked about this a lot. Not really, honestly, just because it's basically prohibitively expensive.
Yeah.
I think if you do it optimally and kind of know how to get your gear up there and all, it's going to be like 30 grand and take like 2 months
Minimum.
to do it. So I just really think it's feasible, you know, especially if you have a family or like a normal job. And so I think it did inspire us to want to pursue mountaineering objectives, though, because there's plenty of really good stuff stateside, right? And so I don't think we necessarily want to do Everest, but we do want to do more stuff here.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, Everest just looks like it would be, one, really difficult, but two, just the amount of people that are on it, the things you have to do to kind of get ready for it. Like you're saying, the time commitment, the money. It seems like it will be crazy.
The other thing is isn't like it's not supposed to be all that technical, right? So it's like the guides and the Sherpas kind of do all the rope setting up and they carry the stuff up for you. So it is difficult from like, obviously it's cold, the altitude is really hard, it's expensive, but you know, it's not like a really like super technical objective.
Right.
At least that's my understanding. I can't speak to it, but But yeah, I think Will and I are more, we do want to try and get into more technical kind of mountaineering stuff, which would kind of like require, obviously living in Colorado would
Oh yeah.
facilitate that, right? Like we could go like on the weekends and kind of work our way up, do like easy stuff that you kind of barely have to rope in for, and kind of work your way up.
Yeah, that's what I've heard about Everest too, is that, it's definitely not the most technical. Like, it's obviously a huge accomplishment, but a lot of stuff is set up for you. But I think there are a lot of more technical things, or like technical mountains to climb, things like that.
That don't cost 30 grand.
Yeah. But there's always that thought that like Everest is the tallest, Everest is the biggest, it is the final.
Oh, it'd be cool.
It is the pinnacle, yeah.
Yeah.
Kind of what we would like to do is sort of kind of do smaller stuff wherever we move, and then kind of work our way up, like Mount Hood, or sorry, Shasta, then Hood, then like Rainier would kind of be like a really cool objective. And once you do that, you like have a lot of the glacier travel skills and the rope skills and stuff that you could start doing other stuff if you wanted to. But Rainier is a really cool objective. That would be a really cool accomplishment.
I would love to do Rainier. Me and a buddy hiked up to Rainier Base Camp with John Muir, or Camp Muir it is. And it just looked like a great spot to hike up from. It looked sweet.
How'd it look? Did it look doable? Could you do it? Were you like, oh,
dude,
man,
it looked doable, man. We got to a point though that was like, you have to rope up because of crevasses after that, and obviously we weren't planning on going any further. But it was kind of it was a pretty tough hike up to where we were. We got there, it was during COVID, and there was like a little welcome center at the bottom, and we planned on getting like water and food at the welcome center, but it was closed. So we hiked it without any water really. And so we started feeling effects of elevation pretty quickly because we didn't have any water or food, which is so stupid. We should have just turned around. And I think it's at like maybe 12, so it's not crazy. It's either like 11 or 12,000 feet that little camp's at, but we definitely felt it.
Oh, no
water or food. It's like, it hits you pretty quick for sure.
I think like part of what it boiled down to too was that, now we've like seen these like big peaks in other parts of the world, and I think they're equally impressive, like mountaineering objectives, like even in just North America, that are much easier to get to. I think like would be like equally technically challenging. Like you can make it as hard as you want for yourself depending on the route you take, and you also don't have to devote like 2 months to them also.
Yep.
So I think I could, and I Parker, you can disagree with me if you want. I think I could get my fill without, going back and, going on Mount Everest for a month or grinding it out. I think there's things that I'd probably like to do more.
I agree. Yeah.
Y'all were kind of alluding to earlier about the travel back being a little bit different than the travel there. Let's hear about that.
I think this is the biggest thing that I would want people to know about if they were planning to book it themselves, because it was like really the biggest headache of the whole trip was like, we like we said, like we'd done the 14-day trek. We ended up finishing in 12 days. So we had extra time on the end of our trip where we just queued up in Lukla, which is this, again, it's like the mountainside town that you fly out of. And, the first day we get there and we're basically like, okay, like we got you a flight tomorrow. Like we'll fly you back to Kathmandu. Tomorrow comes, we go to the airport, which is really like this like large room that people queue in. There really isn't like much of security. Like Parker brought a knife on the plane, like a ceremony. Whoa. or like brought it through security, and they were just like, just stuff it down into the middle of the bag.
Oh, it's fine.
Yeah, just so that you can't reach it. And we're getting ready to get on the plane, and then kind of like without any real indication of what happened, like people that work at the airport just start leaving, and our guide's trying to figure it out, and he's like, I don't know, like maybe the flight was canceled. We don't really know yet. So like the first day this happens, we're like, whatever, like we'll spend an extra day. We'll fly out tomorrow. And then like eventually we hear like the weather was too bad. Like flights can't go. But like you look out from the airport and it's like pretty clear. There's like minimal wind. So you're kind of like, okay. Yeah. So
gusts of miles an hour,
yeah. So you're kind of thinking like, oh man, I mean, maybe it's the weather in Kathmandu. So like the next day comes and like, so very subjectively, the weather is much better and no flights go out. And we're kind of like, okay, well, like, what the heck? Like, we do have an international flight in a couple of days that we want to make. So I think we ended up spending 4 days in Lukla total before we eventually just like took the hit and booked a helicopter. But I think the thing that's sketchy about it is that the people who are running the hotels and the local businesses are also the people that are like working at the airport. And I totally get that there's a safety aspect to it. Like you don't want to fly. It's kind of a sketchy takeoff and landing on the side of a mountain. But I almost think that like there are some outside pressures for flights not to go because it keeps tourists in town buying rooms and buying food. And it's like beneficial to the economy there, like for people to be there. So, and then also say on the same token, you start haggling with other people who are trying to get out for helicopter flights, and the price of the helicopter is fluctuating like right in front of you. So it just seems like very, there are parts of it that seem a little corrupt that kind of took away, I think, from the end of the trip from us, because you finish this like huge thing, you're tired, you lost a bunch of weight, you're just trying to get back, and you're dealing with this like massive headache at the very end of it. I'd be hesitant about going back to Lukla, or I think I would be more inclined to do a different trek that didn't require us to travel through Lukla.
So here's the other thing is that with the guide company, that includes, so you pay for the guide, and that includes a flight up and a flight down. And you can kind of see the ticket stub, and it's like costs like $200 a ticket or whatever. And so what kind of happens is on the way up, they're like, oh, the weather's too bad, we'll have to book you a helicopter. So you pay for the helicopter up. On the way down, you pay for the helicopter on the way back. And I mean, the guy in the guide company told us that he's buddies with the helicopter company guys. So there's like an obvious incentive where he doesn't have to pay for the flight and they get a kickback on the helicopter down. And as flights stack up, and so there'll be, the flights are literally canceled for 3 days. Maybe like the airport's open for an hour or two over 3 days. And so, the demand to get down the mountain increases. So the weather will look nice and it'll be 8 a.m. and they'll just be like, everyone will leave and they'll pack it up. And they don't like try. They're not like, hey, we'll wait until like 11 and maybe it'll clear up. It's just like, pack it up, gone. Everyone, the airport shuts down at like 8 a.m.
There's no like information desk for the different airlines. It's like a couple people that are like, I don't know, that are just wearing vests, and then at a certain point during the day, they just take the vests off and leave. And
vest off,
so they don't even really tell you; they just kind of bounce, and then you're like,
"Yeah,
we're out."
Yeah,
and your
basically,
guy hearsay that it's canceled. And I think one of the things that will be shocking to like someone that's used to flying in an American airport, is that it's like an environment that's rife for corruption, because there's nothing that's like really scheduled in stone. It's like, there's like a general list they sort of print out that's like, these people are kind of meant to fly out at 8 a.m. But like that stuff all moves like in live time. And then when they get canceled and you go to the helicopter pad, like again, it's all bartering. It's like, 45 minutes, we got a flight taking off, we got 5 seats. Who wants it? And it's like, so it's very like, there's all this negotiating. And so it's a very, very rife for corruption. Some people need to get down the mountain to catch their flight back to South America, England, whatever. And they'll pay $1,000 because their flight it'll cost $2,000 to rebook international flight. Right. So people are dead. And literally the other way to get down the mountain is it's literally like a day hike down to a road, a 2-day drive to Kathmandu. Basically,
like a 2-day Jeep ride.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they probably have the same deal at the Jeep ride, like with the.
Oh yeah. It's the same
Yeah,
guy
so-
that owns the helicopter
It's the
place.
same
He just
exact
shows up, hey, $400 for the Jeep.
They
Yeah.
tell you this too. They're like, oh, like, well, there is an alternative. And then they like present you with this like alternative that literally no one would want to do.
Yeah.
It takes-
Hey, options though. Makes you feel
Yeah.
like him.
No,
Did y'all ever watch Death and Other Details on Hulu? That came out like a few months ago.
yeah.
There's like a scene in the end where like there's a helicopter off and everyone's just trying to like bid for seats on it. And it's like a blind bidding going, and it's all I'm picturing for this.
Oh man. Yep.
Sounds similar.
Yeah. Life or death.
Crazy. So y'all ended up getting, was it a helicopter or a plane out on the last, I guess after 4 days in that town?
We ended
Helicopter.
up all returning separately.
Oh,
I got on Parker and I got on helicopters, and then our friend actually stayed behind because they were trying to charge him like, $600 for a helicopter right after they got us on one for $400,
nice.
which is still a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so he ended up staying an extra day, but he eventually made it back. Parker and I flew separately on individual helicopters. I took one that like initially was filled up with a bunch of luggage that actually, which is like, there's limited space. So you kind of just like take whatever they offer you. Mine, the one that I got on, actually flew back up the mountain, dropped a bunch of gear off, picked up more hikers, and then flew to Kathmandu. So I was just like sitting there like, man, I hope this ends up where I want it to.
Right. Going the wrong way here.
Were you on the flight up too? Where you said like it flew up the mountain, dropped stuff off, and then came down. Were you on for the whole part of that?
Yeah, I was on. I had to ride the whole way. They were like, "It's
Hey.
not coming back to Lukla." Like,
You got
so
more
here
of a
we
tour
are. Like,
there.
like the whole time, I'm like, God, I hope something doesn't happen to the helicopter. I'm going to be further away. Like if we get up there and can't take off again.
It's all part of the same scheme. They just take you further up the mountain. You have to get back down again.
There's a plane
right?
from here.
Like, yeah, already I was just like, here we go. Like this might as well happen. So,
And
Yeah.
Will and I had flights for that night, so we had to get back. Our buddy Kevin had a flight for the next day, and so Will and I got our flights. And then they offered our buddy Kevin. They're like, "Hey, the only flight we can get you, I think it was a $600 one. They're like, we can fly you to this town that's literally, I think it was a 10 or 12-hour drive from Kathmandu."
And they wanted to charge him
And I
more?
Yeah, we were like, dude, we're gonna fly somewhere we've never been and take a 10-hour ride to the airport. You can't do that. And so then he turned it down, wound up making the flight the next day, so didn't have to pay the helicopter rate. So it worked out. He had the stones to turn down the $600 helicopter, and then
Smart
it worked
man.
out.
Yeah, well, it's tough to take one that's taking you to somewhere you've never been, that's more expensive. Like, that's wild.
who knows if you're going to have service?
Yeah.
Like,
With cell phone service, it doesn't really work. Like, I mean,
Sounds like a nightmare. Well, did you get any cool views from the helicopters on the way down, or was it still foggy or muggy or whatever?
a little
Still
foggy.
All that money, no good views from the helicopter. That's tough. And then
I think we were just so thankful to get back. It didn't matter at that point.
yeah, you're done with the views.
It was just such a relief. Yeah.
I bet. And then the rest of the trip home was easy after that.
Yeah. I mean, the flights were a little bit of a grinder,
Yeah.
but they went off without a hitch. So
Didn't have to barter at the
Complain.
airport anymore.
Yeah. Use your
And
ticket
I-
later on.
I do want to say we had that bad experience in Lukla where we felt like we were getting the runaround and kind of taken advantage of. But broadly speaking, every other experience, the Nepalese people were super nice.
Awesome.
They were
Yeah.
very,
I agree with
very.
that.
We broadly did not get that kind of a feeling, but it was just at that airport where there's just a prime environment for taking
Oh, yeah.
advantage of tourists.
Yeah.
Felt it. Otherwise, they were super, super kind. Very good experience.
That's cool.
Yeah. Agreed. Agree with that.
Y'all mentioned, I guess you have some other mountains you'd like to do eventually, but what's next on the bucket list? Adventure travel wise.
I don't know. I think on the way back, we were talking about like Rainier. I think that'd be a cool objective, like to start getting more into some harder mountaineering. That's something I'm interested in.
It'd be cool to work up the Pacific coast, right? We want Shasta to be a nice starting point, and then Hood, and then Rainier. I don't know. We have to do something in between Hood and Rainier, but that kind of stuff would be cool.
it looks like that would be just an awesome hike to do. So beautiful out there. Rainier's awesome. That'd be sweet. I hear y'all also may have some aspirations in the Tetons, possibly.
Whoa.
4 of us do the picnic together.
Oh man, that'd be sick.
I don't know if I'm a good enough swimmer and biker to do the picnic. I really want to do the Grand, and I would love to do it like before the end of the year. That would be awesome. I actually did the middle last year, and Alan and I were talking about it. I just flew out there for 2 days, just like wanted to knock it out. And I feel like, I don't know, like the Grand School, like you can, like you just like a little bit of like technical climbing at the top. It's not super hard, but it'd be cool to do it for the views, you know?
Oh yeah. That's the part we would need help
Also,
on because we don't have any background in technical climbing. So I think getting up to the Grand, we could do that part, but the technical climbing, that's something you don't want to mess up at all. So
yeah, especially if we've done the picnic and it's like sketchy, we're exhausted.
Yeah. People do it in like staged like that too, where you have someone do the swim with you who's fresh, someone do the bike with you who's fresh. Listen, we'd be down to do the Grand portion. That'd be awesome. Yeah. I'd love to take that off.
What are the distances?
Yeah, we'll talk about the picnic for anybody that doesn't know, because we're just kind of referring to this random picnic idea. Yeah. So the Teton picnic, you start in Jackson Hole and you bike, I believe it's 20 something miles to
like a marathon.
Yeah, it's like 26 miles or so to Grand Teton National Park. And then you have I believe it's a 1.5 or 2 mile swim across Jenny Lake, and you're doing this like really early in the morning because you have to summit really early to avoid bad weather and stuff. So you're probably doing the swim in the dark. We would have wetsuits and whatnot, but anyway, swim across the lake,
like right at dawn.
Yeah, and then you hike up Grand Teton, which is definitely no easy hike. Like that's a full day in itself, and I believe it's 7
miles, 7,000 feet.
Yeah, 7 miles, 7,000 feet of elevation gain. So it's a lot. It's doable. Will and I have both separately done Middle Teton, which is 6,000 feet of elevation gain in 6 miles. So it's not that much different than Middle Teton. It is more technical at the top, like we were saying, though. And then so you get up to the top of the Grand, and then you have to do it all in reverse to complete the full picnic. So
it ends up being like 64 miles, I think, right? Like that.
It's
something like
it's packed
total, yeah. But yeah, it would be a full day.
It's like an Ironman type of day, basically. And the concept is like Jackson Hole Square, basically, to the top of the Tetons and back in a day.
Yeah.
But the mileage associated with it is pretty beefy.
Yeah, it'll be.
Man, like, do they have like something they can kind of rest on? Like, is someone supporting them, like with a paddleboard or something, or do they just like a mile and a half?
You can kind of do it however you want. So it's not like a sanctioned event or anything. You kind of just rip off and do it on your own. But I've seen people swimming with like a dry bag or something to carry their like hiking gear in, and so the dry bag
I've seen that.
Floats, and you just like kind of pull it behind you. And if you get tired, you kind of just rest on the dry bag kind of deal. I mean, you could.
I do think people like will support like the sweat, like just to make sure they're safe. Like people paddleboard alongside of them and stuff.
Yeah.
Just
especially swim back at the end.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
and like people who do it also like they'll usually bike with someone and like draft off them a little bit. Like you can like do it with other people to like for the motivation, and it's like just safer to do it with someone who's fresh.
Oh yeah,
for like the different stages, but sure. I think it's still quite the undertaking.
A huge undertaking. Would love to do it. Joe's a little bit better at swimming than I am. So I'll have to get the swim down. But
know nothing about climbing though.
Also wouldn't be a terrible idea to just go out and do the Grand in itself first.
Yeah, we could do that like this year before. Maybe.
Last time I mentioned it to Joe, he was like, "Nah, if we're going out there, we should just do the whole thing."
And then I regret that. I'm gonna take that statement back. I don't like. Yeah, I regret it.
It's not like a super easy thing. So maybe what we should do is try to do the Grand this year, and then next year do the whole undertaking.
Yeah, because we need to do the picnic June, July, right? Because you need as much daylight as possible.
Yeah, needs to be June or July. And the Europe trip is kind of running into that a little bit. So,
well, should we do the draft since we're talking about different states and all the natural beauty that exists?
Let's do it.
So what we're doing is, I guess, the best outdoor nature states. Y'all can decide, Parker, Will, who goes first, and then the other one, then Alan and me.
I want it to be random who goes first.
Ooh.
I don't know. Because like there's a benefit to going later, especially
Yeah,
if it's a team.
if y'all want, one of you could go first and one of you could go last, because those are kind of like the best two positions, I feel like, for four people.
I think
you
so.
Get the turn.
You think so?
For sure.
Alan, you decide the order.
Parker can go first. He needs it.
I'll go first. I always draft last in fantasy football, so it's a good. It's my time.
You get it back here.
Yeah. All right. This is an obvious pick. This is a top pick for everyone, probably. California. I gotta say, California. I really haven't been. I haven't been done much in Southern California, so mostly Northern California for me. Just Tahoe, Yosemite, Big Sur. You've got stuff on the beach that is like one of the prettiest places I've ever been to, I think. And then obviously Yosemite is breathtaking. Lots of outdoorsy stuff. I think you could argue maybe Colorado, Utah is better for just pure outdoor sport kind of stuff. But for me, I think California is one of the prettiest places I've ever been to. And that includes having been in South America, Nepal. I love Northern California.
It's got everything. The state has everything.
Yeah, you can do pretty much anything you want to do in California outdoor-wise.
You got the desert.
Guess I'm up next. There's so many different ways you could go with this. I almost wanted to take a mountain state, but I love the ocean so much. I have to do a state that has ocean and mountains. I'm going Hawaii.
I knew you were going to.
Big surf.
Good choice.
Great mountains. Volcanoes. Just so much opens up with the water there. Love Hawaii. I think it's my favorite place on the planet, actually, that I've been to. So, got to rock with Hawaii.
I knew those two were going first.
Yeah.
I'm surprised at South Carolina, though. I think South Carolina, Hawaii.
Yeah, they're pretty comparable, honestly. South Carolina might make a guest appearance later on. We'll have to see. Let's see what's on the board.
Both have oceans, grass, sand.
Yeah. So similar. A lot of aloha in South Carolina.
I think I'm going to take Alaska, I think.
Oh, yeah. Very cool.
Good choice.
Yeah.
Good choice.
Good one.
You win strictly on landmass there, so that's good.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. I've got the most territory. And if it all melts at some point, there might be more beauty that appears. So it's kind of like, I know there's already good stuff, and then it's like a little bit of like a mystery box. So
Sig mountains and surf, for sure. Surf's cold, though.
Bring a wetsuit.
Dang, man. You guys made it tough. I didn't realize. I was thinking that Alaska and Hawaii were going to be sleepers for this. But, it turns out I'm not drafting with a bunch of amateurs.
Hey.
Let's see. The 4 spot. This is tough. I think I know which two I'm going to pick. I think I'm going to take Utah at number 4. I think that's a good choice. You've got Zion, Bryce Canyon, Moab and Arches, Canyonlands. I love Utah so much, and I love the desert there. I think you get a lot of good national parks. You also have Salt Lake. There's some variability there. That's what I'm taking at the 4 spot. For 5, let's see. I think I'm going to take... I'm kind of split on 2 here. I think I'm going to take Wyoming at number 5. Yeah.
You get the Tetons.
I'll take the Tetons. I think they're like, you get the Wind River Range. I think hard to beat if we're going just strictly on like wild areas and nature. I think that's up there too.
You get Yellowstone, that whole area. Yeah.
Good pick.
Offense.
Yeah, Utah. I think I'm gonna, since you're there right now, I'll do Colorado. I think
I was thinking
it's
Colorado
pretty
too.
comparable to Utah. Mountains, snowboarding, get the summer or the
Mhm.
winter adventures. I love it.
Man, Colorado falling to number 6. It's pretty wild. Man. Dang, those last 3, I really wanted one of those. It's all good because I'm going to take Wyoming's neighbor to the north in Montana. So you get Glacier, you get a lot of...
Is it the Yellowstone Ranch?
Yeah, there you go. You get all the stuff just above Yellowstone, Glacier. There's a lot of just beautiful mountains out that way too.
And we're eating
All
up
right.
the West Coast.
A place that I was able to visit recently, I'm going to pick Oregon. My family's from there, so it's just really pretty. I think it's got some good like Cascades, kind of big mountains, and it's got beaches that are pretty too, right? You can't really swim in them, but they look pretty. And then just where my family grew up is sort of like kind of in the Willamette Valley. And so it's kind of like gentle, nice hills. It's very green, and you're like surrounded by mountains on either side. So it's very pretty. It's maybe less extreme than the Rockies. After that, I guess like I want to pick Arizona. I really want a desert state. So kind of northern Arizona. I basically can't pick Utah, so I'm picking northern Arizona. But
You get the Grand Canyon.
Yeah.
Grand Canyon.
Yeah,
Take that. Woo!
it's awesome.
And yeah, Arizona.
Sedona, all that area is awesome.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, that was going to be my pick right there because I love the Grand Canyon. I want a desert state too. Wow, Joe, it's okay because I have a backup plan.
Oh.
Man, should I go South Carolina? No, probably not here. I think I'm going to go with Washington State. We talked about Mount Rainier. They got the North Cascades. You got Olympic National Park. There's just so many wild areas of the Pacific Northwest there that you can adventure in.
It's almost as good as Oregon. It's a good pick. I mean, it's good.
Right, almost.
Shadow of Oregon. I'm
Just
going to go nod to
Pause
the
it.
3 of y'all. Going to go Florida with this. Big beach guy.
Whoa.
And so I just got
Nice.
a lot of beach to choose from. Plus some alligators in the middle, which is pretty neat.
Hey, I think Florida slept on, honestly, with adventure
Florida
stuff.
slept on too.
Yeah,
Plus you got all the people, so another dynamic for adventure.
Florida man.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Florida.
The wildlife. The
Yeah.
domesticated wildlife.
All right, Will, last pick. What you got?
Still a couple states left that I like. I already took a desert state, so I'm going to pass on Nevada. I think I'm going to take North Carolina with the last pick. Get the Blue Ridge Mountains, get some coast.
Get the Outer Banks.
Get the Outer Banks.
Oh
Yeah, get the Appalachians. I'm happy with that as my final choice. So
Love that. Again, North Carolina's probably slept on with adventure stuff because I think it's
there's good climbing there also.
there's a ton of adventure stuff there. Well, awesome. Who do you think won?
This is awesome.
Me for sure.
We'll have to leave it up to social media. I don't know. Hawaii's hard to beat though.
Hawaii's a good choice. I wanted to grab Hawaii.
I knew the second I was after Alan, I was like, I want Hawaii.
Yeah,
but
dude, you're not getting
There's
Hawaii.
zero shot at it.
No chance.
No,
There's
it's
just no
fallen
way.
for.
No.
That man is in love with that state,
Yeah, I moved there.
which is fair. Get it.
Yeah.
But we appreciate you guys coming on. This was awesome to hear about your trip and excited to hike the Grand Teton, to summit the Grand with y'all later. It's going to happen.
Oh,
Yeah, we got to do that. Thanks for coming on, guys. It was a good time. Great to catch up.